I work on a daily basis with the youth. What I see at the moment is severe distress regarding the new counter-terrorism laws. The Muslim community feels targeted and besieged. Muslims are almost exclusively viewed through the prism of counter-terrorism laws. Given that these new laws create the atmosphere of such a major divide in the hearts and minds of all concerned, isn't it time the government changed its approach?
George Brandis.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sheikh Chikawi. And may I say that if you spend your career working with young Muslim men, then you are absolutely essential to what we are trying to achieve, because what we are trying to achieve is to prevent young Muslim men being enticed and ensnared into the false allure of ISIL and the false allure of violence in the Middle East and participating in the civil war in Syria and in northern Iraq. Now, Sheikh Chikawi, you mentioned the laws. The laws are important, we'll come back to them, but they're just one element of what the government is trying to do. Another important element of what the government is trying to do is to engage the community, to reach out to partner with people like you, and I've used the word partner in all the speeches I've given about this issue, because you and community leaders within the Islamic community like you are our partners in trying to save young men in your communities from being ensnared by those wicked people who move among your communities and try to recruit them to do violence and in some cases to engage in acts of self-destruction. So this is, I think, if I may say so, a shared problem. It's a shared problem. We as the government need to ensure that our policies, that our laws, that our agencies are focused on preventing the radicalisation of young men and also of keeping the community safe. But this is a particular threat to your community because you're the victim of these predators.
Well, George, I'm going to interrupt you there, and we will, as you say, come back to the details of the laws. I've got plenty of questions on that, but I want to just go back to Sheikh Wassim, and I want to ask you, what are you hearing? What is it that's got you so worried?
Well, at the moment, everybody's been tarnished with the one brush. And the reality is, it's not like Muslims are lining up in their masses to become radicalised. I mean, I work with Muslims every single day, with the youth every single day, and I can tell you that the problems do not revolve around radicalisation. And so at the end of the day, what we've sort of framed is this narrative that you have young Muslim angry men ready to tear down Australian values, and that's just not the case. I mean, that is very fallacious, to say the least. And there is a divide that's occurring, a sense of distrust, and there are legitimate grievances that people have.
Distrust in what, actually?
Well, there's a distrust. I mean, there's this, you know, when the Prime Minister came out and he said, you know, we're abandoning the Section 18C to get goodwill with the Muslims, it felt extremely targeted, as though there was this them and us type of mentality. And this is very important because they have in their minds legitimate grievances, and these aren't being addressed. I mean, Keith Suttle was one person who said, we can't just have this mindset where we keep legislating and isolating a community to feel more isolated and besieged and disenfranchised. And we need to start thinking outside the square.
Thank you, Tony. As a young Muslim man, I'm constantly faced with this question. Why is it that Muslims are constantly racially profiled, stereotyped, painted with a broad brush, and are held accountable to the media and also to the greater society when one radical person takes a wrong step? Is that the nature of our fair go? Is that the nature of our multiculturalism and inclusion, as you're saying?
Well, from my point of view, multiculturalism means that all the different cultures in our society should live peacefully and mutually respectfully together. Anybody who stereotypes the Muslim community does the wrong thing. But let's not blind out or turn our face from the fact that there is a problem. And the problem is, as I said to Sheikh Wassim a moment ago, that there are people, a small handful of, in my view, very wicked people, who target young Muslim men and try and ensnare them into going to the Middle East and fighting for ISIL and Jabhat al-Nusra and lead them on a path to self-destruction. Your community is the focus of that predation, and we're determined to do what we can, both for the benefit of the entirety of the Australian people, and in particular for the benefit of your community, to protect you.
We've got Lydia Shelley from the Muslim Legal Network. I mean, what do you think? Are people right to have fears about the fact that some of these people with cancelled passports are still in the community?
If I may, I'd just like to jump it back a sec, if you don't mind. In terms of radicalisation, Senator Brandis, you completely ignore ASIO's reports to Parliament for some years now in stating that the rising right-wing groups in this country also pose a threat. So in this debate regarding radicalisation, it's not a Muslim or a non-Muslim issue. What it is an issue of national security, obviously. However, we're talking about radicalisation through a racial lens. So please don't use the Muslim people, don't use the issue of radicalisation to really sell these laws, which is really about a sustained attack on civil liberties in this country. If I may, sorry, one other issue. If I may, you also referred to me and my community as a victim. We are not victims, and please don't paint us as such.
Well, first of all, it's not right to say that right-wing extremist groups don't attract the attention of the national security agencies, because they do. But I wasn't asked about them. And we can't pretend that there isn't a specific problem here, because this is what we know. We know that at the moment there are, by our best estimates, 71 young Australians fighting in the northern Iraq and Syrian theatres for ISIL, Jabhat al-Nusra and associated terrorist organisations. We know that more than 20 young Australians have returned from doing the same thing. We know that 15 young Australians have been killed. 2 of them have suicided, have been suicide bombers in that civil war. And every last one of those people have been recruited from within this community. And that's why you mightn't like to hear me say the word victim, but what I'm trying to convey to you is that the government thinks that this community is being preyed upon. Its young men in particular are being preyed upon. They're being ensnared, they're being cajoled by those who would recruit them with perhaps the false glamour of participating in a foreign civil war and leading them on a path to destruction.
Are you talking here about southwestern Sydney or the broad Muslim community?
I'm talking about the broader Muslim community in Australia. So we're talking about more than 100 people, almost all of them young men, from the Muslim community. So please let us not. I hear what you say about civil liberties, and we can debate that as well, but please let us not pretend that there is not a specific problem that affects this community.
Okay, Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, actually you can briefly respond, but I want to hear from Sheikh Mohammed, because he's from
sorry,
Brisbane.
I think you've misunderstood what I've said, Senator Brandis. I never once discounted the fact that there is an issue in regards to why young men are leaving this country to go fight overseas. But I was specifically referencing how radicalisation in this country is being portrayed. We've recently had somebody, as a protester, and I use that term very loosely, dress up as in a Ku Klux Klan outfit and go to Parliament House to protest. The fact that somebody in this country could take the uniform of a right-wing organisation that has been filthy in its murder of people based on the colour of their skin is absolutely disgusting, and it barely raised a bit of laughter in Parliament and or the media. So the issue in regards to radicalisation is it's particularly being viewed through a racial and religious lens in this country. It is not sustainable. It is not going to protect Australian citizens long term. So I appreciate the fact that you're trying to highlight these issues of the Muslim community, and may I say you're doing a wonderful job using it and advertising it to sell your laws, which are an attack on civil liberties. Thank you.
Look, I'm sorry, but let us not pretend that the 100 or more young men who have been enticed to go and fight for ISIL and Jabhat al-Nusra and other terrorist organisations have not come from a particular community. That's not the community's fault. It's the fault of the people who prey upon this community. And if what ISIL and Jabhat al-Nusra are doing isn't racism, engaging in genocide against the Yazidis and the Christians and the Shia and moderate Sunnis and the Kurds. If that's not racism, I don't know what
George
is.
Brandis, just hang on for a second.